Hello, welcome to the SOAS Centre of Yoga Studies for this evening's lecture with Fabrizio Speziale. I'm Ruth Westerby, a doctoral candidate at SOAS University of London, and I would like to offer a warm welcome to everybody, whether you're here in person or whether you're catching up with a later recording of this lecture. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Fabrizio Speziale. Fabrizio is professor at the School of Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences and a member of the Centre for South Asian and Himalayan Studies at Paris Marseille. Professor Speziale works on the history of sciences in Persianate South Asia and the interactions between Persian and Indic textual cultures. His last monograph, Culture Persan et Médecine Ayurvédique en Asie du Sud, from 2018, is a detailed study of the translation process of Ayurvedic sources into Persian, which took place in India between the 14th and the 19th centuries. More recently, he has a 2022 article on accounts of the alchemical techniques associated with yogis in Persian texts in an article entitled Beyond the Wonders of India, Yogis in Persian Medical Alchemical Writings in South Asia. Professor Speziale's most recent publication, however, is a volume co-edited with Satoshi Ogura titled Imperial Historiography and the Creation of Persian Scholarship on India. That volume is available open access, so you can get your own copy. In November last year, Professor Speziale and Andrea Akri co-organized a colloquium in Marseille on yoga and Muslim societies, and I was very sorry to miss it, unfortunately. And the colloquium featured many of the scholars who have also spoken for the SOAS Centre of Yoga Studies. Luckily, though, Professor Speziale is currently editing the proceedings of that conference. So for those of you who couldn't make it, like me, we will get to read those proceedings in due course. So I'd like to turn the floor over to you for this evening's lecture entitled The Rule, a Sect of Muslim Yogis in Colonial India. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Ruth, for this very kind introduction, and also very much thanks to Jacqueline for inviting me today. And so, my lecture today, I will present what is really the first stage of my ongoing research on the Ravels. This is one of the main groups of Muslim yogis during the colonial period. I have to say that I started this research already some years ago, but still until today, I have not been able to locate some relevant archival documents from the Punjab Police Department, because as we will see, some of these groups were considered among the criminal groups in India. And now, actually, I doubt if these documents from the police department are still extant, considering the documents containing sensitive information about colonial institution actions in India could have been destroyed before the British left. And so I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to present here my, really for the first time, my findings and working hypothesis, and to receive your comments and suggestions. So for what it concerns earlier scholarship, very few studies examined Muslim yogis and their practices. And we can say that many features of this phenomenon have hardly received any attention. Briggs provided an early account of the Muslim sects of yogis in his well-known work on the Nath tradition, and two French anthropologists, Catherine Servan-Schreiber, who unfortunately died a few years ago, and Véronique Bouillet, I think are the only contemporary scholars who looked at these groups in detail. Catherine Servan-Schreiber work focused on the Bhartrihari yogis, which is a group of Muslim musicians and singers specializing in the Nath repertoire. And Véronique Bouillet has provided very interesting account of the Muhammad Bod, which was a prayer which is meant to be recited by Muslim yogis during the month of Ramadan. So another important point we should really look at is the fact that in South Asia, actually Muslims' interaction with yogis and their practice was not at all a uniform phenomenon, but a composite process where various groups employ different and sometimes overlapping strategies within Muslim societies. The rituals emerged in a context where other groups were trying to get access and appropriate yogi's practice. The Sufis, especially, wrote Sufis of various orders, of various Sufi orders. The Sufism, just to remind, is the most important mystical trend in the Sunni Islam. And many Sufis in India wrote on yoga and assimilated practice drawn from yoga in their treatises, such as, for example, methods for breath control and mantras. And Muslim sultans were particularly eager to acquire the secrets of yogi's powers and especially longevity. And therefore, Muslim physician and Persian medical texts written in South Asia provided many formulas of this mercurial and alchemical preparation ascribed to yogis, such as those for longevity and virility, which sultans and other wealthy clients sought. And you can see here some of the probably well-known treatise written by Sufis in Persian and Urdu, which include a description of yogis practice. And this one of this copy that is from Bahauddin Shattar, it's an Arabic translation of a text written originally in Persian, and it's also interesting because it tests, the trans-regional circulation of this text, because this is a copy that is kept in Jakarta with an interlinear translation into Japanese. And yeah, for what is concerned, this Persian medical text, Persian medical and chemical text, which include plenty of description of mercurial preparation ascribed to yogi. You can see some of my articles which I published, and the most recent one in 2022. And we can see also some of the illustration that were given in this text, especially for this technical apparatus that was used to sublimate mercury and to refine mercury in a way that was possible to eat these substances that were made out with mercury and other minerals. And also the other aspect that also, Ruth mentioned is the fact that when we think of the relation between yoga and Muslim societies, we also think, South Asia, of course, is one of the main space in which this relation took place, but also this was a real a trans-regional phenomenon. A trans-regional phenomenon that started a long time ago in the medieval period. Probably the first place where contacts began was Central Asia, where in Central Asia there were still Buddhist communities between the 14th century, around 14th century. And then we have to think that this interaction as a trans-regional phenomenon that spanned from the Middle East until Southeast Asia. And this was the topic of this conference that we organized in Marseille, and now we are working on editing the proceedings which should be published on the Journal of Yoga Studies. And so another very important point is the categories, the taxonomies that we may use to study these kind of groups. And it's to say that the studies of groups such as the Raval raises substantial questions about which are the most coherent categories to define the status occupied by these groups in the Indian societies. How should we categorize groups whose practice and beliefs lie between Hindu and Muslim societies? Especially because we should consider that the Raval were just a fragment of this phenomenon in India. Different sources show the existence of a large and heterogeneous universe of groups with fluid religious beliefs that fluctuate between Islam and Hinduism. And among them, also the creation of Hindu branches of Sufi mystical orders is worth to be mentioned because in a certain way it's not the specular phenomenon of the formation of Muslim groups of yogis. Therefore, these groups uh, these groups of Muslim yogis emerged in a context where the refusal of strict religious identity and the adoption of flexible and hybrid ones was a relatively common phenomenon. And modern human sciences have often struggled, I believe, with conceptualizing what lies between religious borders. And this is related to the local context in which they were created, as the dominant religions around the Mediterranean have not interacted in the same way as it happened in India. Even in regions where different religious groups coexisted, such, for example, Bosnia and the Balkans, this did not lead really to the creation, for example, of Christian branches of orders. And to overcome this lacuna, human science have forged various neologisms to define similar phenomena, some of which have been hardly criticized, such, for example, syncretism, which, like other terms, implies an essentialist interpretation of religions. And many semantic neologisms can be made from existing categories, as you may see here. And I will skip this slide. And in my research, I propose to shift from a perspective centered on religious identities to one more focused on the professional setting in which the yogi's arts were practiced, such as in the case, for example, of the alchemical methods which are ascribed to the yogis, which are described in Persian texts. This approach, I try to explore a working hypothesis based on how the rituals and the arts functioned in the societies and focus on the professional setting where the occult arts of the yogis were performed. One of the main working hypotheses that I have is that the identification as the yogis does not come chiefly from the fact that the rituals practice yogi, because as also Veronique Bouyer wrote, yogi often do not practice yoga. But the identification as a yogi came from the endogamous transmission of professional and technical knowledge associated with the yogis. So it is in the sphere of professional practice that the Muslim groups assimilated the alchemical and astrological and healing arts of the yogis. And here, as we will see, the economic aspect plays a crucial role in understanding the emergence of the rituals, who accumulated considerable wealth through their profession and troubles. Moreover, the rituals were immersed in social context, in a social environment in which the appropriation of each other professional knowledge was a common and lucrative phenomenon, such as in the case of the physician and the mahout, this is to say the elephant keepers, which I have studied in some of my publication and also in my book on Persian culture and Ayurvedic medicine in South Asia. So it is unclear when Muslim sect of yogis were established. Although some could have been created during the Mughal or the late Mughal period, maybe the 18th century. Anyhow, the sources of the British administration indicated that these groups were widespread in the 19th and early 20th century India. In addition, until the colonial period, several establishments of yogi existed in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Briggs, who published his book in 1938, visited at that time the well-known monastery of Tilla Jogyan, which is located nowadays in Pakistan, during his research. You can see here where is located Tilla Jogyan. As you can see, it's also in this region now in which we have Rawalpindi from one side, Gujranwala from the other side, Lahore, Amritsar. As we will see, this is also the main region in which also the Rawal and most of these Muslim groups of yogis were located. And the Nath set of yogis is certainly the set that maintained the most remarkable contacts with the Muslim societies. For example, in his articles, Véronique Bouillet has analyzed that in detail. And among the Muslim Naths, we find, for example, the Jafar Peers, which were also called the Andi Parang. Sometimes they are considered as different groups, but actually are the same, who were present, especially in the Punjab, as the Raval also did. And Nur Ahmad Chishti provides an account of this group in his Tahqiqat Chishti, which is a work in Urdu on the history of Lahore, published in the mid-19th centuries. As you can see, the origin of this group is said to date back to this Shakar Nath, sometimes presented as disciple of the same Gorakhnath, but sometimes also as a yogi from the period of the Mughal Emperor Akbar. And the story simply said that Shakarnatha was looking for Hindu disciples. He could not find any. The only one who wanted to be initiated was a Muslim named Jafar. And so he did, and he instructed him only to accept as his disciple Muslim which were not circumcised. And this is a page from this historical work by Chishti. And among the other groups, we find out some other groups which are not really referred as being directly connected with the Nath. For example, the Bachwala, which were also quite widespread in North India, and also the Badar. You can see this typical description from the colonial ethnographic survey. For example, the Bachwala, there were chronicles, panegyrists, and they were Hindu, and probably they adopted Islam at a certain point, while the Badar were practicing palmistry and exorcised the ghosts and demons, which are also a typical feature that we will find about the rabbis. So the Ravals were certainly also, from a numerical point of view, the main branch of Nath yogis in the colonial period. And the members of this branch were attested, especially in a rather large region between northwest India and Afghanistan, and were especially present in the Punjab. As I said before, their location really overlapped with those of the other Nath groups, because Western, especially Northwestern India, were the 12 original panth of the Nath order were based. These Ravals, as others of these Muslim groups of yogis, were known as wandering ascetics, occultists, healers, and astrologers. And according to several sources, the Ravals were considered one of the original 12 panth of the Nath yogis, although according to Briggs, not all the yogi really did share this view. And you can see this description, they were considered occultists and quacks. They were divided into two main groups, and they were present in this large region that goes from today Indian Punjab until Afghanistan. And so the demographic and ethnographic surveys published by the British provided several accounts of the Ravals. Several of these are quite negative, derogatory, and some of them just repeated the same information that was given in the early accounts. The two earlier accounts that I found is the one given by Ibsen, that was the author of the report on the census of the Punjab taken in 1881, and Rose in his glossary of the tribes encased of the Punjab. As you can say, this is a typical description, so we can see there were exorcisers of evil spirits. They also worship an Hindu deity. This is interesting because as we'll see, soon they also took part into Muslim religious ceremonies. And in Sial culture, the rebels of Sial culture, they were considered probably the one more expert in magic powers. And they, as we also have in other accounts, they were even considered able to avert storms. And so, all this Muslim branch of the rebels was established really remains unclear. What we know is that, as is this pointed out by early studies, the rebels at the beginnings were in Hindu sects. And according to one account, they were originally from Rajasthan, and they stemmed from one ascetic called Bappa Rawal, which is credited with the foundation of the kingdom of Nepal. But according to another account, the Rawals were also known as Nagnat, and Nagnat, which was the founder of this sect, had been a disciple of Goraknath. And moreover, we also know that the Ravals were considered to be connected with other suborders of the Nath, and especially with the Parasnatis, who were giants. And so, when and how the Ravals became, for the most part, a Muslim suborder, this remains unclear. The Rawals are mentioned in the Tashrikul Aqwam, which is an important Persian ethnographic treatise on the Indian caste, professions, and sects, which was completed in the early 19th century for James Skinner. And this treatise refers to the Raval Jugi as the ninth of the 12 panths of the Nath order. However, it does not make any reference to them being Muslim. While by the late 19th century, British officer accounts identified the Rawals as a Yogi clan composed chiefly of Muslim followers. However, it seems pretty unlikely, I believe, that this transformation on such a large scale could have taken place in just half a century. And you can see here the opening page of the Tashrikul Aqwam, which includes a quite important description of the Hindu and the Muslim ascetic orders and groups in India. So, if the period when this change occurred remains unclear, the geographical distribution of Hindu-Muslim Rawals allows us to raise some hypotheses on the dynamics underlying this phenomenon. The data from the colonial sources suggest that most Muslim Rawals were located in northwest South Asia, a region with a high density of Muslim population, where this group would come into closer contacts with Islam. In contrast, in other areas, the Rawals remained an Hindu clan, such as in Rajasthan, in Baroda, Bombay, and Nizam state. When we have several accounts of these rebel groups, they're all Hindus. And also, it doesn't seem that the adoption of Islam was a systematic phenomenon in colonial Punjab, because in 1911, we still have several Rawals from Lahore, Rawalpindi, and Patiala who define themselves as Hindus. Colonial reports also relate several local accounts of the origins of the Rawals and the etymology of their name. And most of these are intended to provide a more Islamized background to these groups. One of these narratives aimed to link the group's origin to the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And the attribution of the origin of a phenomenon to prophetic time is a very common stratagem used in Muslim society to domesticate elements borrowed from cross-cultural contexts. And as you can see from these accounts now in Amritsar, it is said that the ancestor of this tribe, Rial, was in service of the Prophet. Once alms were being given to the prophet, no one came to receive them, and Rial accepted them. And since then, the members of this tribe subsist on a charity, and they're called Rawal. And another narrative aims to Islamize the roots of the Rawal professional practice by associating it with a branch of Muslim occult arts, which is the Ilmul Raml, which is the term for geomancy. And according to this version in Punjab, the term was interpreted as a corrupted form of Ramal, which is the diviner who practice geomancy. And then we have other versions. For example, we have this again Punjabi version, which fabricates a Persian origin of this name, and also associated it to one episode of Hira Ranja, which is a well-known love romance, when the male character Ranja becomes an ascetic. And he adopted the guise of fakir and wandered till he came to Tilla, Julian. And after that, all his disciples and companions were called Rawal. And also several sources claim the Rawalpindi was named after this group and means the village of the Rawals, because Pindi in Punjabi means village. So let's have a look now at the demographic features and professional features of this group. So colonial reports provided a rough estimation of the people who defined themselves as Muslim yogis and Rawals. On the one hand, we know very well that we should consider the many flaws of the methods used to compile the census of India. On the other hand, we should also consider that the attribution to a group was based on the replies which were given by the people. So we should think that this person had like some reason to lie, which is quite unlikely. I think we should consider the census in the same, we should take the census in the same way, with the same apparatus that we may use in historical criticism, to treat any kind of source. And so, as you can see here, the Census of India of 1901 records that Muslim yogis were the largest groups of yogis after the Hindus, with more than 40,000 followers, and half of them were women. While in the census about 20 years later, in 1921, the number of Muslim yogis dropped down to 31,000. And concerning the Rawals, in 1881, their total in Punjab was about 17, almost 18,000. And the highest concentration of this group were found in all this region that we saw, and I'm going to show you also in another picture. You can see the Gurdaspur were followed by Jalandhar, Hoshiarpur, Amritsar, Gujranwala, Lahore, and Sialkot. So as we'll see from the map, they are all like a place quite close. While, for example, only two of them were in Delhi. And yeah, you can see in this picture this is located. Now you have Gujranwala here, Sialkot. Here is Rawalpindi. So probably Rawalpindi is the western lip. Probably. And then we have also some group in Afghanistan from one side. And this is also the other city where we find a lot of them, Gurdaspur, Amritsar, Jalandhar, and Hoshiarpur. Also in this part, as we will see, also there were some villages here where there were a lot of these Rawals. And there was also a village that has this name near Kapurthala. We'll later on talk about Kapurthala as well, which are located west of Jalandhar. And this number increased considerably in the census of Punjab of 1911, where the numbers of Rawals increased to 28,000, of which the majority were women. And the number of persons who referred themselves to be Rawals in Rawalpindi almost doubled and counted more than 2,000 members. And these data are in line with the growth of the Indian population, which we recorded in the census from 1881 to 1911. However, I think it is quite an open question to what extent these data reflect the demographic and social changes or a change also in the method by which the census recorded professional membership. So the demographic and ethnographic reports provide several accounts of the occupation and profession of the Rawals. And these accounts suggest that the self-identification of the members as yogis was not really much related to the practice of asceticism, but to the practice of the occult arts associated with the yogis. Moreover, these reports show that the professional practices of the Rawals were changing and diversifying considerably during the colonial period. So Rawal's professional activities included a range of different arts, and these activities may be divided very roughly, into the following categories. Devotional activities, practice of astrology, occult arts, magical arts, practice as oculist, and also new profession and overseas activities. These occupations sometimes overlap in the practice, and the main common feature underlying these different activities was the itinerant character of these jobs. So we know that the Rawals also were taking part in Muslim religious ceremonies, such as those of Muharram, in which we can see here now during Muharram they recite stories about the doings of Muhammad, accounts of his miracles, and hints in his praise. So you remember we saw in another slide that from the other another group of Rawals, actually they were worshipping Hindu deities, but they also at the same time take part to Muslim religious ceremonies. And another practice which is very closely associated to the Rawals is astrology. Several accounts refer that the Rawals were actually considered the hereditary astrologers of the Punjab. And many of them worked as itinerant astrologers in Punjab and in other Indian regions. However, the involvement in this occupation was declining in the beginning of the 20th century, when many Rawals took more profitable jobs and some became landowners. So the practice of medical profession was very common among both men and women of this group. The Rawals were well known for their ability to perform cataract surgery. The census of Punjab on 1911 records actually 252 Rawals were just like practicing oculists among the medical practitioners in Punjab, and 4 of them were women. But the ratio of genre was reversed in the practice of midwifery. Muslim women recorded as yogis were particularly known in this domain, representing the overwhelming majority of the midwives and nurses practicing in Punjab. There were more than 2,000 of them, a number which is much higher than that of men practicing as oculists. And Western doctors enrolled in the Indian Medical Service left accounts of the Rawals' skills in cataract surgery, and some provided rather detailed descriptions of it. And these Western sources offer contrasting evaluation of the Rawals' skills in removing the cataracts. Some did, as you can see, they are good physicians. Many of them, they say that these are very dangerous doctors. They often make injuries to people, and so on. And we can see here, yeah, one of the miniatures of the Tashrikul Aqwam, which is this ethnographic illustrated treatise in Persian that illustrates the practice of the Indian occultists. This is not a raval. I don't think this is a raval, but just is the chapter on the Kahal. And as also this case, that I don't think these are ravels. There is a picture from the Welcome collection. And yeah, we can skip this. And so colonial accounts of the ravels include often derogatory remarks on the activity of these members. At the same time, these reports also testified that the social status of this group was changing very fast, and the professions of these groups allowed many of them to become a fairly wealthy group. In AD 81, Ibn described Muslim yogis, as you can see here, as really a second and inferior class of yogis. Now you can see this quotation. Now you say that yogis can be divided into classes. The first are the respectable ones, they're all Hindus. The second is these low caste fakirs and fortune tellers, which are most of them Muslims. And moreover, early accounts refer that the ravels were well known for practicing criminal activities in Punjab and elsewhere. And sorry, no, this is not good ones. Yeah, this is the good one. So, yeah, several accounts, they say they were very well known as criminals. They were notorious cheats. And one of their favorite devices is to personate long lost relatives. And also, they were traveling all over India, from Deccan to Bombay and Calcutta, to pilfer and rob. And in Amritsar, there were even different groups of ravels which were involved in criminal affairs. And one of them even regarded themselves as more respectable, say, rogues than the other, but they are the worst cheats. The report on the census of Punjab of 1911 testified to a reality that has considerably changed. Moreover, it refers that the ravels openly contested with British authorities about how they were represented in the earlier reports, especially the ravels of Julundur and Hoshiarpur, which, as we will see, were probably among the wealthiest of this group. And the ravels also objected to be called fortune tellers by profession, as only a minority of them actually was practicing this profession. And education indeed played an important role in changing the professional and the social status of the ravels in the Punjab. Many of them were literate and were also employed in native schools which used the Landa scripts of the Punjab, which was also used in commercial transactions. And as you can see, the ravels were employed as they were supposed to be adepts of the multiplication table. And these schools were purely business schools and make no attempt towards religious or moral education. So what's time? How long still I have?
It's up to you. You can. We're approaching 40 minutes now, so that's good.
Okay. So I will tell you very briefly about this case of the Gagarbana, which was a village located between Amritsar, Hoshiarpur, and Jalandhar, which really shows the changing social status of the place. The board of the Economic Inquiry of Punjab ordered a survey of Gagarbana, which was selected as a typical Jat village of central Punjab. The Rawals were the third largest group in the village with 49 families. Their level of literacy was about 11%, and the village watchman was a Rawal, but however, all the Rawals family did not depend on the local economy and agriculture. As you can say from this quotation, say they earned their living by the practice of this art, astrology, similar art, in other parts of India and abroad, and they remit considerable sums to their native village. You can see where is located this Gagarbhani here, no, between Kapurthala, Amritsar, and Jalandhar. And so the Rawals were by far the group who received the most significant amount of money orders at the local post office. And due to these incomes, Rawal's wives were considered among the wealthiest women of the village and led a comfortable life compared to other wives. You can see this comparison that is made. No, the first this report talk about the wives of the water bearers, the sweepers, which do quite difficult life, and then he say the wives of the traders and oil presser have an easy times, while the wives of the jogi Rawals may be said to live in almost luxury easy, and they are to a good extent supported by money received from their men, which are frequently absent on their begging expeditions. And several Rawals of the village also become landowners, especially small properties. In spite of this, they did not practice agriculture. Moreover, they did not seem really interested in managing their lands, as lands was not really a relevant source of income for them. Several Rawals also mortgaged the lands, and they were among the most in-depth groups of the village. In 1851, they even refused to pay land revenues, and their lands were confiscated and given as common property of the village. So the main evolution of the professional features of these groups in the 19th century was the fact to expand their traveling activities from the other Indian regions to overseas destinations. The development of steamboat service in the second half of the century played a crucial role in this process. By the beginning of the 20th century, companies such as the British India Steam Navigation Company established services between India and UK, East Africa, Southeast Asia, Japan, and Australia. For example, steamboats were also very, very important in increasing considerably the number of Muslims that could go to make the pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina from South Asia. And many of these Rawals traveled overseas, especially to practice their ophthalmic skills. And several colonial officers directly testified of these troubles. This is an early account of this village from where a company of them started from for a trip to Australia, but then one of them got sick and he had to get back home. And certainly Colonel Henry Smith, known as Harry Jullundur Smith, was the British officer who had closer contacts with the rebels. He had worked as a civil surgeon in Giulundur and Amritsar, and for several years led extensive observation of the Raval's surgical practice. He wrote a treatise on the treatment of cataract, in which he devoted an entire chapter to the description of the Raval operation. And in this article, which was published in the Transaction of the Ophthalmological Society of the United Kingdom, no, he says that he know personally one of them, one of these Ravals, come to Southern Europe every summer and at present time to perform this operation. And from all appearance, he must be doing very well from a money point of view. This is the article. And in his treatise on the treatment of cataract, Henry Smith also says something more about these Ravals in Europe, and he said that I knew of 3 Ravals from the Julandur district of the Punjab who were practicing the art in Europe, among other things ophthalmic. One was in Hull, one in Manchester, and the third was itinerant in Italy and Austria. From a financial point of view, they were all undoubtedly doing well. And also say that the Indian fortune tellers who board steamers at Port Said and Aden are in miles on the Red Sea, Aden, yeah, just at the enter of the Red Sea in Yemen, are in my observation mainly Rawals from the Punjab. And we see here also a picture of this operation of removal of the cataract that is taken by this book by Robert Henry Elliot. And but also again, these are not pictures of the Ravals in my view, because they don't have the features that are described, like necklace or other things like that. And also, we know the Raval's travels overseas seems also to be motivated by various kind of interest, not only to practice as astrologers or oculists. Some, for example, were involved in commercial activities in different Asian countries. Some were peddlers. They have large commercial concerns in Malaysia, Singapore, Sumatra, Borneo, Australia, Burma, and some of them even were engaged in pearl fishery in the Malay Islands. And Rawals could also spend years abroad, such as in the case of this young member of this group who left a memoir of his travels in Paris, which were originally written in French, and a translation of this is provided by an historian from Punjab, who was the author of an apologetic history of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, published in the early 20th century. So this Raval left from Lahore in the service of a French traveler. He passed some time in Rome, where he said he got a letter from his friend, the French ambassador in Rome, and entered the country in 1868. Once in Paris, he was hosted by a certain Reverend Simon, who then he died, this Reverend Simon. And his presence in Paris raised curiosity, and so he was brought to meet Napoleon III, because Napoleon III at a certain moment asked to meet all the distinguished foreigners which were living in the city. So the story said Napoleon was quite impressed with the witty character of the Raval and asked him to pay a visit regularly. And so the two men become close, and Napoleon even asked the Raval to join a diplomatic mission to Istanbul, which the latter did not accept, and then appointed him in the service of the new foreign minister Agénor de Gramont, which was one of the leading actors of the disastrous Franco-Prussian War of 1871. During the war, the Raval was put on the staff of Patrice de MacMahon as an advisory member, and he finally fled the country after the French defeat at the Battle of Sedan in 1870. So Ali Sadiq, he was from Kapurthala, which is a princely state very near to Jalandhar, that we saw now in the previous map. And he writes that at first he was very skeptical about the authenticity of this memoir. But then he encountered in 1880 two ravels from Pagwara, which is a city near to Kapurthala. And these had traveled to different parts in Europe. They earned enormous amount of money in a short time. They returned home, purchased land, good houses. And he said he was very he was well acquainted. Yeah, oh, yeah, this is here. He was well acquainted with one of them and give descriptions of him. As you can say, no, he testified they were using money orders. Also, they were even able to hire a European interpreter that they took with him during the travels in Europe. And also he took with him two or three companions and pupils belonging to his own family. And so this is the account that is made by this Rawal to Ali Sadiq about this travel. So he say, whenever I hired an apartment in any town in Europe, the fame of my skill spread so quickly that the number of patients coming to me became so great that the whole street was blocked by the crowds, and the police had to make room for traffic. And many people tried to force their way through the crowd just to touch the hem of my garment in order to be cured. And as my presence in every town caused a great falling off in the practice of native doctors, they grew very jealous of me and got orders issued by the local government for me to leave the town. For this reason, I couldn't stay long in any one place and had to wander from place to place, staying only a few days in each town. So, and notwithstanding such unfavorable circumstances, my fees did not average less than 5, sometimes 10 or more pounds a day. And if I had permitted to stay in each city as long as I wished, I could have easily earned 3,000 pounds a month. And these amounts reported by the Raval are really quite astonishing if we think that the purchasing power of 10 pounds, which was the daily earning of this Raval in 1880, was equivalent to about 1,500 pounds today, while 3,000 were equivalent to about £500,000 pounds. But what he was referring this account is not so unlikely because, for example, I found some description in the French press about some of these Indian fakirs that they were visiting Paris in the early 20th century. And the accounts are really quite the same. Crowds of people outside of the theater, they were trying to get in, and crowds of people, they were walking on each other when this Indian fakir was throwing a talisman and amulets over the public in the theater. So a description that is quite similar in the description that is taken from newspaper, from French newspapers of the time. And if you have any other reference to this kind of yogis, practicing in UK, that of course will be very interesting to compare. So in conclusion, the available archival sources provide a picture of the Rawal where the practice of their professional skills played a fundamental role in upgrading their socio-economic status in the changing society of the British period. During the colonial period, the Rawals evolved into a group where the identification as Rawal was not closely associated with a yogic asceticism, but with the practice of professional and technical skills transmitted within the group. The traditional technical skills of the Rawals, which most Western physicians criticized, proved actually to be a critical factor in their social ascension in a context increasingly dominated by the hegemony of Western technology. While in the 1880s, the Rawals were mainly represented as a gang of traveling beggars and cheats. By the first decades of the 20th century, they had become a wealthy group who made considerable earnings from their profession, could buy lands, and travel extensively abroad. Also, the archival sources reveal the absence of significant judgment or discrimination based on religious grounds in the society of colonial India. Certain Hindus yogis did not eat with Muslim ones. However, this eventually was not because they were Muslims, as Hindus do the same with other groups of Hindus, right? And on the other hand, we do not find any reference to condemnations or fatwas made by Muslim ulama or other religious figures against the religious beliefs and practice of Muslim yogis. For instance, in his accounts of Muslim yogis in the Taqiqat-e-Chishti, Nur Ahmad Chishti does not condemn this group, but instead looks at them with a curious attitude. And also, in the colonial sources, the Rawals are blamed for being charlatans and cheats and impostors, but not at all for their religious beliefs. The Rawals of the colonial period appears to be a highly flexible group that could embody aspects of both Muslim and Hindu traditions and shift between them. Moreover, they could accommodate their profession to the fast-changing condition of the colonial period and take full advantage of the new technological tools of economic globalization, such as money transfer and steamboat service, which for the first time connected India to most of the world. In this regard, one may also wonder if the Rawals' travels in Europe inspired somehow Western emulators such as Blackaman, alias Pietro Vers from Castrovillari, a town in Calabria, and his former assistant Coringa, alias René Bernard from Bordeaux, who popularized the figure of the Indian fakir in Western circles and societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a fascinating talk. That was a real tour de force, absolutely such detailed research there. I'm afraid my internet fell off right at the beginning, just for a few minutes, so I hope I didn't miss too much. But I was particularly interested in how you were discussing this group as kind of both Hindu and Muslim, and I was wondering about their self-representations. You've given us a huge wealth of data, but not a huge amount from the perspective of the Rawls. So I was wondering whether there were any sources on how they were representing themselves. Towards the end of your presentation, you had the younger man from Lahore who was courted by Napoleon, and then you had another source as well. I just wondered what else you might have.
For the moment, that's all I have. For example, I've been searching a lot in all the Persian, this kind of Persian ethnographic treatises which are written from the 18th and 19th century. There are a number of them which include also accounts of yogi and other set of Hindu ascetic groups. Especially one of my PhD students, Zhoner Zumanov, made his PhD dissertation on that. So I really went through all these Persian treatises written by both Muslim, Hindu, and colonial officers describing all these religious sects, and he didn't find any account of these groups of Muslim yogis, such as the Tashikul Lakwam. I also checked in some Persian encyclopedias dealing with arts and professions. No, they do not mention them. So the only source I have for now are these archival sources, some memoir, which I was not able still to find the French version. I asked to several colleagues at the BNF in Paris, National Library, We don't know if it exists or not. And the other source, which is very important, which I was not able to find, is this report from the Punjab Police Department, which I've been searching almost everywhere in the state archives, online catalogs, and I haven't found. So as I was saying in the beginning, maybe it doesn't even exist anymore because some colleagues from the National Archives, they told me that many of these reports, when they were, reporting some kind of things like that, were destroyed before the British left. So let's say that, yeah, most of the sources I have, I show you today, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Brilliant. I was very interested in the numbers of women in sort of registered as the sect and their professions. So you said that the majority of midwives were Raoul. Were there any Raoul women involved in more of the occult specialisms or the surgery?
We don't have really much count about that. If not, about 4 women that were also practicing as occulists and they were performing the surgery.
Oh, right. Okay.
These are the only account. And also, yeah, also Jason is asking the same, almost, yes,
Yeah.
same question, yeah, in is
Yeah, Jason put a few questions up. I don't know if we can go to him live. I'll wait for Jackie to tell me whether we can, but I'll read out the question. Hi, Jackie.
Hi. Yes, it may be easier just to read out the question because I'm not sure if there's enough light here to show Jason in the audience. So,
Sure. Okay. Right. So Jason Birch has published on yoga and Ayurveda as well. And he's put a few questions up. So he says, thanks for such an informative and well-researched talk. You mentioned that the identification of the Rals as yogis was based not so much on their practice of yoga, but their professional technical knowledge associated with yogis. Have you come across any evidence that yogic practices were part of this professional technical knowledge, such as the use of pranayama or meditation to attain occult powers?
I would have really liked to come across that, but I didn't until now. Yeah, no, any description of that. Only Veronique Bouillet is talking about the meditative practice used by the Muslim yogis, but it's just like the recitation of a prayer. That's all. It's a kind of a recitation of a prayer that is also not too different from some kind of some Muslim prayers, which are used in Sufi group. So no, didn't find until now any description of really meditation techniques used by this group. Doesn't mean they did not exist, but I couldn't find.
Yeah, and I had a look at I think it was your 2022 article, and I think you had the same finding there that mantras were repeated where absolutely necessary, but not otherwise.
Yeah. But we
Mm.
can imagine, yeah, that probably this group they were reciting these kind of mantras and prayers, such as the Muhammad Bod, which has been described in this article. I can go back and show it to you. Véronique Bouillet in this article, Dialogue entre le nate yogi ed Islam, publishing this book that I have edited. He provides the translation of this text that show clearly that there was some kind of meditation practice, but seems mostly confined to the recitation of prayers. And
Okay.
Jason also asked about the medical skills, if they include other forms of surgery.
Yeah. So Jason said, did their medical skills include any other forms of surgery apart from removing cataracts, such as repairing split ears or severed noses?
Not split ears or severed noses, but piles. They
Right.
were known, yeah, to remove piles. And exactly one of these Rawal, which are mentioned by Sadiq Ali, he refers exactly that he performed one of these operation in Europe of piles, and the patient died. So he was obliged to give back the money to them. And he said, the next time we will make them sign a contract in which they said also if the surgery failed, they don't have to claim back the money. Yeah. So only
Yeah,
pilots, as far as I've seen. Yeah.
because some of your sources were saying, one of your sources said that they were not good surgeons, and that actually they had accidents. But I think there was just one source on that.
Yeah, Western physician in the Indian medical service, they mostly criticized, yeah, the rough way in which they perform, yeah, lack of hygiene and all that. Yeah,
Hmm.
most of
Okay.
the time, yeah. But we can imagine that this operation certainly was, I mean, was effective to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they were obviously in high demand. Jason's also said that he missed the reason that you gave for why certain Hindu yogis would not eat with Muslim ones. Why was that?
Yeah, I didn't give the reason actually. That's what Briggs refer in his book. Mm,
Hmm.
So I don't know exactly the reason why. Yeah, I was, yeah, that's a good question. And also about okay, this is another question that maybe I have for you, because these colonial reports, they talk a lot about women yogis. No,
Yeah.
so my question is, were these women yogis just recorded as such in the case of the Rawal, no? At a certain point, even there are more women Rawals than men, okay? So my
Mm.
question is that, is just because they were the wives of the Rawals and so they were considered as such in the colonial reports, so, or there was something else? Like, for example, I don't know what you think of this, but in the Tashrikul Aqwam of James Skinner here, he refers to a group of yogi that was only composed by women.
Right.
I don't know if you have any other reference clearer. I can check it out, the name of this group. And so this is still an open question for me also, how to interpret this high number of Rawal women.
Yeah, yeah. I'm afraid I don't have an answer for that. I mean, I'm very interested in that question, and I look at a slightly earlier period than this. Is there any material on the celibacy or otherwise of the sect? Were they householder yogis?
Sorry, is there any?
Is there any information on whether the Raoul's were supposed to be celibate? Did they have ascetic lifestyles, or were they married householders?
Most of them, I think they were householders, married householders.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if any of the other members of the audience have any comments on that question. And of course, this if this lecture goes out after the live version, you may get some responses to your query then. Um, yeah, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, do not hesitate to write me if you have any suggestion about, yeah, this point that on which I have all these open questions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And if people want contact details for Brizio, if you get in touch with the Centre of Yoga Studies, we'll be able to put you in touch for sure. So there are no further questions at the moment in the Q&A for this session, but anybody in the live group can pop questions into there. Jackie, did you want to say something?
No, at the moment, it was quite fascinating. Thank you so much, Fabrizio. It was a wonderful presentation. And as Ruth has mentioned, extremely detailed and fascinating to see that this group and their impact across different nations. So I noticed that you included um, some records mainly on the travels to Britain and other parts of Europe. Have you looked at all in the archives of South Asia beyond India? Say, for example, in Australia, I'm just wondering whether, given that I'm located there, I have a question whether you have come across any accounts in the Australian records, or they might be something that I can look up for you and see if there's any accounts of these Relwa people who have traveled there.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you since you are in Australia. Yes, precisely. Yes. I've been searching for accounts now in the press in northern Italy because there were one of these rival that was in northern Italy. I haven't found anything. I haven't searched much in the UK. I started to search, but I didn't find much. And I would be very interested yet to search in the Australian archives, especially in newspapers, because, for example, what I found about the presence of these Indian fakirs in France in the early 20th centuries was taken by local newspapers. So if you have any suggestions about which archives I could check for Australian newspapers of the late 19th, early 20th century, that will be very, very useful. Because we know they were traveling to Australia. This is referred reading in most of the sources that say that Australia was one of their destinations. And one source also referred they were traveling to America. But until now, I mean, I don't know what you think, but until now, I haven't been able to find online archives of newspapers, which are really extensive in this regard. There are not unified archives. I also asked to colleagues who are journalists and photographers, and I checked because, for example, this one of these Raoul, no, he says that when he was traveling Europe, a lot of people they asked to take pictures with him. That's no probably quite now early 20th century. You can imagine that it was quite common at that time. So I also checked for photographic archives, which were suggested to me by a friend who is a photographer, but couldn't really find anything. On this regard. So if you have any suggestion about other archives I should check, but please do not hesitate. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think about that. Yes, the newspaper archives are actually quite diverse and dispersed in Australia because of the small accounts that were across the country. There was no unified central archiving like in Britain at that time. But one place that I will look for you is the archive of new migrants, because it actually in the early 20th century, that's when we were having that period of what's called the White Australia policy. So people that were coming in through India were being recorded and photographs were being taken of them. So I'll certainly see if there's something that you can look for there.
Yeah, yeah. And also,
there is another question there. Is there one moment?
Yeah, the other question is asking whether the recording will be available from somebody who joined late. So
yeah,
I believe the recording will be made available on the Centre of Yoga Studies channels.
Okay. Oh, send me the link.
Yeah, of course.
And also, I had another question. I don't know what you think of this. Do you have Jason, for example, or Jackie or Ruth, do you know of other accounts left by Indian yogis or fakirs who traveled abroad in this period between the late 19th, early 20th century? Do you know if there are other accounts of yogis travels uh, abroad until the early 20th century?
Yeah, I mean, you finished with Karinga, didn't you? So I was thinking of Mark Singleton's work, which perhaps you've already seen. I wasn't sure whether there was something in that, and it was also reminding me of Deborah Diamond's work in the Smithsonian exhibition catalogue. She discusses some of that material. I can share those references with you, but I think you've probably already come across them.
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, but if you have any suggestion, do not hesitate, to send it to me.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I know
Okay.
Philip Dislip, sorry, one last point was Philip Dislip's article, I think, looks at the early reception of some travelers of Indian descent that migrated to India, and he has quite an extensive look at the archives there. So his work would be very important to look at, Philip Dislip.
Okay, Can you send me the reference later on?
Yes, yes, we'll do.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So can I ask, perhaps as a sort of closing question, what are you hoping to do with this work? When might we see it? Do you have more research to conduct? And are you hoping to publish it as a monograph, perhaps, or journal articles?
Ooh, very good question. I'm still working on it, and this is really the first time that I present on this topic. Because for years I was looking for this document which I didn't find. So yeah, I think now probably we try to work on an article, first article about that, and then also depending on the fact if I will be able to locate this French memoir or travelogue. This also will make a difference. I mean, if there will be one article or two articles or a couple of articles. So, yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you ever so much. Yeah, so on behalf of the Centre of Yoga Studies, thank you so much for presenting this fascinating research with us. And I hope it's the beginning of a wider conversation and collaboration. And I'm sure people who listen to the presentation will come forward with suggestions for some of your really great questions. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks to you.